Life at Asgard became busier and busier. There were more and more people in Midgard to watch. Thor was busy killing jotuns and trolls, and Loki went from bad to worse. He was always mischievous, but now he became malicious in his mischievous tricks. He flew into a rage any time he felt he did not get enough credit for his cleverness. Then Baldur, Baldur the gentle and beautiful, began to have bad dreams. This concerned the Aesir. They were afraid that it meant something bad was going to happen. They met together at Yggdrasil's foot, and they decided to send Odin to the grave of a wise prophetess to ask her what these dreams meant. In the black of night, Odin rode to the grave. He said magical chants which brought the ghost of the woman moaning and groaning up. She said wearily, "Baldur's days are numbered. He already has a seat prepared for him in the dark world." Then she sank back into the ground and was gone. Odin rode back with a sad heart. He said there was nothing they could do. It was foretold. But Baldur's mother, Frigg, would not let it rest. She had to save her son. She rode through the world, and she made all things, living and lifeless, promise to not harm her son. Water, stones, animals, trees, they all willingly promised to not harm the beautiful, gentle god. Joyfully, Frigg returned to Asgard, and the Aesir were happy again. Nothing evil could happen to Baldur now. The Aesir were so happy that they decided to hold a game to celebrate. They formed a ring around Baldur, and they began to throw things at him. Pebbles, rocks, spears, axes. They even shot arrows at him. They all laughed, including Baldur, as everything bounced off of Baldur and fell to the ground. Baldur felt as no more than flower petals were being thrown at him. But Loki did not laugh. Jealousy was eating at his heart. He went away, disguised himself as an old woman, and came up to Frigg. "How wonderfully you protected your son," he said. "But are you sure that everything in the world has promised to not harm Baldur?" "Oh, I'm quite sure," said Frigg. "Everything is well, almost everything. I didn't ask the mistletoe, because it's so tiny and so soft it could never harm him." "Aha, this will be Baldur's undoing," thought the jealous Loki. He hobbled away and found mistletoe. He made an arrow from one of its twigs. Then he returned to the Aesir, who were still standing in circles, throwing things at Baldur, and he went up to Baldur's brother, Hod, who was blind. "Why don't you take part in the game?" Loki asked. "How can I?" said Hod. "I cannot see where Baldur is standing, and I have no weapon." "Here," said Loki, "take my bow and arrow, and I will aim your shot." With Loki's help, Hod pulled the bowstring, and he listened for the sound of the arrow bouncing off onto the ground. Instead, he heard a dull thud and a cry of anguish from all around. Never had an arrow hit its mark so truly. It had pierced Baldur's heart. In horror, the Aesir turned, and all they saw was Hod, for Loki had slipped away. Their arms fell limply to their sides. They wept. How could they go on without beautiful, gentle Baldur? At last the Aesir pulled themselves together, and they prepared a stately funeral. They carried Baldur down to the shore near where his ship lay beached. All the gods and goddesses, the elves and dwarves, even some jotuns and trolls came to bid farewell to Baldur. Only Loki was nowhere to be found. They built a pyre under the mast, and they covered it with Baldur's treasure. But when they tried to launch the ship, it stood as if rooted to the ground. Even Thor couldn't move it. They had to send to Jotunheim for an ogress. She came at once, riding on a wild wolf with a serpent as a bridle, and she gave the ship such a shove that sparks flew from the ground, and the land trembled. Once the ship was afloat, Baldur's body was placed on the funeral pyre. When Nanna, his wife, saw this, her heart broke, and she died. She could not live without him. So the Aesir sadly laid her by her husband's side. Then Odin took off his golden armlet, and he put it on Baldur's chest as a gift, and he lit the funeral pyre. Thor swung his hammer 3 times over the fire and blessed it. The ropes were cut, and the ship floated off to sea with Odin's black ravens fluttering about the mast. Aegir's daughters tossed high their white waves of sea water, and everyone wept for Baldur, and the ship sank down to hell. Odin's sorrow was great, but Frigg's was greater still. She blamed herself for her carelessness of not asking the mistletoe. "Who wants to win my everlasting love?" she asked. "Who dares travel the dark road to hell and beg her to let Baldur return?" Odin's son, Hermod, who had great courage, stepped forward and said that he would do so. So they saddled Odin's horse, Sleipnir, and he galloped away. For 9 days and nights he rode across dismal swamps and through haunted valleys. On the 9th night he came to a bridge paved with gold, which spanned an icy river which flowed from Niflheim. Without fear, Hermod started across it, but its guardians, a giantess sitting on the other bank, challenged him. "Who makes my bridge ring so loudly?" she cried. "100 dead horsemen make less noise than your steed. You're not a dead man. The color in your cheeks gives you away." She rose to stop him. "I am Hermod, son of Odin. I am on my way to hell to seek my brother Baldur." "Pass," said the giantess. "I saw your fair brother crossing the bridge. The way to hell is down and north," she added, pointing the way, for she too was grieving for Baldur. Hermod followed the road, which soon led him to the gate of Hell's realm. At the doorstep he dismounted, and he walked into the halls of Hell. Stony-faced, dreadful to behold, Hel sat on her throne. Across from her sat Baldur, with Nanna by his side. She had a wreath of wilted flowers on her head, and a horn of sweet mead stood before them. They sat without stirring, as if in a dream. Hermod greeted Hel and begged to speak. For a whole night he pleaded with her to let Baldur go. He told her how much the Aesir grieved, and how nature was weeping for him. At last she rose from her throne, and the gold that entwined her huge body flared like flames. "If it is true that Baldur is so beloved that all things, living and lifeless, weep for him, I will let him return. But if there is one thing that will not weep, then he will remain with me." Hermod prepared to leave, and Baldur rose and went with him through the door. He thanked Hermod for coming such a long way for him, and he gave him Draupnir, the golden armlet, and asked him to take it back to Odin, because only the living need gold. Hermod rode back to Asgard as fast as Sleipnir could carry him, and he carried Hel's words, which brought new hope to the Aesir. They had no doubt that all things in the world, living and lifeless, would willingly weep for Baldur. Frigg sent messengers throughout the world to tell all things to weep. Every creature and everything wept, men, women, beasts, birds, trees, flowers, even stones. Everything living and lifeless shed tears for Baldur. But as the messengers were returning, they came upon an old crone sitting all alone in a cave. When they asked her to weep, she refused to shed a tear. She said, "Never has Baldur done anything for me. let hell keep what is hers. She called herself Thok, but she was really Loki in disguise. And so Baldur had to remain in the dark realm of Hel. There he was soon joined by Hod, for after the rules of the Aesir, life must be paid with life. Vali, Odin's youngest son, avenged Baldur's death and sent Hod to Hel.